Every December, the meme theologians come out of hibernation. You know the ones. They post that picture of Horus and Mithras next to Jesus and say, "Look, the church just copy and pasted this." Or they shout it in all capital letters on their feed, "Christians stole December 25th from the pagans." And when people say it, they say it with a kind of certainty, as if it's obvious, as if we all should know this, as if the early church was sitting around saying, "Well, the Roman festival is already happening, let's just steal that." Except the real story behind December 25th is nothing like that. Not even close. If you grab a shovel and start digging through actual history, Jewish history, Roman history, Christian history, the ground looks totally different than the comments section make it sound. In fact, the real reason Christians use December 25th doesn't come from Rome at all. It comes from Jerusalem. Comes from the Jewish calendar. It comes from the way that the first Jewish believers understood prophecy, time, and the moment God stepped into the world. So today, we're going to walk slowly through the whole thing. Not the internet version, not the oversimplified memes, not the angry TikToks, but the real story. The one the ancient world actually understood and it left behind. And by the time we're done, you might walk away seeing December 25th not as a copy, but it's something far older, deeper, and more meaningful than you ever realized. Let's just get this one out of the way early because it's where most people start. If you ask the average person why Christmas lands on December 25th, you'll likely find out that they just don't know. But then those who have been educated by the University of Social Media, the quote-unquote more refined, you'll get answers like, "Christians stole it from the pagans." Then maybe a little bit more details come out from those who think they're in the know. "Oh, that was the date of the Roman festival of Saturnalia." Or, "That was the birthday of Sol Invictus." Or, "Christians took over the Solstice celebration." Those claims float around like they're facts. But here's the problem. When you actually check the ancient sources, none of it fits. Let's walk through the big ones one by one. Saturnalia is the one a lot of people know about. It was loud, it was chaotic. It involved feasts, gifts, role reversals, gambling, and a kind of social upside down. If you've never heard of it, let me give you a rundown. It was one of the most popular festivals in ancient Rome, honoring Saturn, the Roman god of agriculture and sowing. It was less of a religious festival and more of a cultural one. Historians like Livy, Seneca, and Macrobius give us the core customs of the feast. Role reversals where slaves were treated as equals, and sometimes they were even waited on by their masters. Oh, and there was gift giving, but it was mostly small items like candles or figurines or sweets, nothing that resembled modern Christmas gifts. And of course, there was feasting, large public and private meals, drinking, and a loud celebration. Dice games, which were normally banned in the empire, were permitted, and there was no public business conducted. The disruption of social order was part of the fun. So let's do a quick inventory check. Did Saturnalia have evergreen trees? No. Yule logs? No. A virgin birth? Definitely not. Dying and rising gods? Nope. It was a harvest festival. It had more in common with a rowdy Mardi Gras than a silent night. But here's the big one, the one where most people get their wrong assumptions from. They say Saturnalia was on December 25th, and so Christians just took the day to make it easier for pagans to adopt their newly created traditions. But Saturnalia ran from December 17th to the 23rd, not the 25th. Never the 25th. No version of Saturnalia ever touches the 25th. So why do people connect them? Because of old school influencers, just like the social media echoes of today, repeating the already disproved theories. In the 1800s, a handful of scholars speculated about it without reading the Roman calendars carefully. And the theory stuck. Not because it was provable, but because it made a catchy story. Writers like Jacob Grimm and later 20th century skeptics tried to lump all winter celebrations together. You know how people are. Something doesn't have to be true for people to believe it as fact. It just has to connect to them emotionally or sound like they want it to be. But modern historians, both Christian and secular, have debunked this theory for decades. But people still connect the superficial connections. Gift-giving, wintertime, feasts, and they think it must all be the same. But the cultural meaning of the two is not the same at all. The factual, historical truth is, there's no ancient writer who ever said Christians took December 25th from Saturnalia. Not one. However, there's still the question, did Saturnalia ever influence anything in Christmas? And the answer to that is yes, but only indirectly and not in the way that many anti-Christian skeptics would want it to be. Medieval Europeans already enjoyed feast in winter, and the church at the time allowed cultural customs like gift-giving to survive. Some Saturnalia habits did morph into general winter practices, but not Christmas itself. And these habits were social, not religious. So, did Christians steal December 25th from Saturnalia? Not in the slightest. Christians had a much deeper, more faith-based reason to consider December 25th, and it had nothing to do with the empire that was persecuting them. Think about it logically for a second. If the early Christians were trying to win over pagans by copying their holidays, Saturnalia would have been the worst possible choice. Why would a persecuted minority group, who was trying to preach holiness, sobriety, and the worship of the one true God, align their most holy sacred day with a festival for drunkenness, gambling, and chaos? That's not a marketing strategy, that's just a PR nightmare. The early church fathers spent centuries preaching against the behaviors of Saturnalia. They weren't trying to mimic it, they were trying to survive it. So the next time that you hear someone claim that Christianity stole December 25th from the Romans' festival of Saturnalia, you can know that they really have no clue what they're saying. They're just spouting off the popular social media theory of the day, not historical facts. So, did Christianity steal December 25th from Rome, specifically from Sol Invictus? This is the more polished version of the pagan Christmas argument, and honestly, it's the one that most people feel confident about. They'll say December 25th was stolen from Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. And on paper, it sounds like a strong point. A Roman emperor, an official feast, sun symbolism, cosmic language, all of it. But here's the problem. The Roman sources don't line up with the story at all. Not even a little. History does not agree. If anything, Sol Invictus wasn't the source Christians borrowed from. Sol Invictus was Rome's attempt to answer a growing Christian movement that was already reshaping the empire. And here's the truth. Historical Roman documents don't actually support the argument. Almost everything people repeat online about Sol Invictus and December 25th is either wrong, misunderstood, or wildly oversimplified. So let's slow down and walk through the real history, not the internet version. Because once you see who Sol Invictus really was, what the cult actually believed, and when the festival really happened, the entire Christian stole December 25th theory falls apart. People often assume Sol Invictus had a massive December 25th celebration, but we actually have inscriptions, the actual calendar of the time, carved in stone, listing the festivals of Sol Invictus. And the dates are August 8th, August 9th, October 19th, and December 11th. That's it. None of those are December 25th. You have to squint really hard to make December 11th look like the 25th. Understand that there is not a single Roman calendar, inscription, temple record, or imperial decree tying Sol Invictus to December 25th for more than 80 years after the cult was created. So, where did December 25th come from? Well, to answer that, you have to know who created Sol Invictus in the first place. We all know Nero, we know Julius Caesar, we know Marcus Aurelius, but hardly anyone knows Aurelian, even though he's one of the most important emperors Rome ever had. Aurelian ruled from AD 270 to 275, only 5 years, but historians credit him with literally saving the Roman Empire from total collapse. This was the period called the Crisis of the 3rd Century. The empire was splitting into 3 rival empires. The economy was collapsing. Plagues were breaking out everywhere. Barbarians were invading. Civil wars were happening every few months. and assassinations of one emperor after another were taking place. Rome was fracturing. It was unstable. It was one bad month away from disappearing completely. Aurelian pulled it back together. And once he stabilized the borders, crushed rebellions, rebuilt military strength, and even constructed the Aurelian walls, which are still standing in part of Rome today, he needed something else. He needed a unifying symbol that the entire empire, the army, the provinces, the citizens could rally behind. Not a local god, not a regional cult, not a deity tied to one ethnic group. Something universal, something imperial, something that could represent Rome reborn. So, he created one. Sol Invictus, the unconquering sun. Not a long-standing tradition, not an ancient midwinter feast, not a festival Christians needed to compete with. It was a state-created cult, born in Aurelian's political crisis, not in Rome's ancient religious memory. Sol Invictus was imperial propaganda, a symbol of Roman resilience. And here's what people never tell you. Sol Invictus had no sacred text, no nativity story, no virgin birth, no mother goddess, no child god symbolism, no shepherds, no sun reborn myth, no theological depth. And the worship? It involved state sacrifices, military parades, public games, and festivals sponsored by the emperor. That's it. This was not a grassroots religious movement. This was not something the average Roman was emotionally attached to. It was a political symbol, a way of giving the empire something to unify around after decades of chaos. By the time Sol Invictus was created in AD 274, Christianity had already existed for over 200 years. The Gospels were already written. Churches already existed in major cities. Christians already observed key dates tied to Passover and March 25th and December 25th were already in circulation in Christian calculation traditions. Sol Invictus didn't shape Christianity. Christianity was already spreading across the empire. In Rome, well, they was scrambling to keep up. So, if everything I just said is true, why do some people claim Sol Invictus was celebrated on December 25th? Because of one document. Just one. A Roman almanac called the Chronograph of 354, written long after Aurelian in the year 354 AD. This is the first time Sol Invictus shows up connected to December 25th. Not in the first century, not the second, not the third, not even in most of the fourth. A single reference appears 80 years after the cult was created and over 300 years after Jesus' ministry. This does not prove Christians borrowed anything. It actually points to the opposite directions. Rome assigned Sol Invictus to December 25th after Christians were already using the date. It was Rome copying Christianity, not Christianity copying Rome. So, why does this myth survive? Honestly, because it sounds clever, because it fits a modern narrative, and because nobody checks the actual Roman sources. Sol Invictus had no nativity, no December 25th origins, no conceptual overlap with the birth of Jesus, no theological resemblance, no virgin birth, no infancy imagery, and no influence on early Christian thought. The Sol Invictus theory survives not because it's true, but because it's popular. Once you look at the history, the conclusion is straightforward. Sol Invictus does not explain December 25th at all. So, when those two don't work, some modern people tried this angle. Well, December 25th is the solstice. The sun is reborn. Except the Roman world didn't celebrate the solstice the way people assume. It wasn't a major holiday. It wasn't filled with symbolism. And because the Julian calendar drifted, because Julius Caesar miscalculated the length of a solar year, the solstice didn't even fall on December 25th at the time. So the solstice idea falls flat too. So if it wasn't Saturnalia, and if it wasn't Sol Invictus, and if it wasn't the solstice, where in the world did the December 25th date come from? And to answer that, we have to stop thinking like modern Westerners and start thinking like the people who first followed Jesus. Most people try to figure out December 25th by looking at Rome, but the real answer never started in Rome at all. If you trace the story the way the earliest Christians understood it, you don't end up in Saturnalia or Sol Invictus. You end up inside Jewish thought, Jewish calendars, and the way first-century believers measured sacred time. And once you step into that world, the whole picture shifts. Because the earliest Christians weren't Europeans. They weren't part of a medieval church culture. They weren't trying to Christianize Roman festivals. They were Jewish, Messianic Jews, men and women shaped by the Hebrew scriptures. And by the way, Jewish people understood sacred time. And one of the most fascinating, most forgotten pieces of early Jewish tradition is something called integral age. This concept that a prophet dies on the same day he was conceived is deeply rooted in the Hebrew idea of shlimut, which means wholeness or perfection. God is a God of order. He doesn't leave loose ends. A perfect life requires a perfect circle, not birthday, conception. A complete circle, full measure, perfect symmetry. The Babylonian Talmud says in Rosh Hashanah 11a, the Holy One, blessed be He, completes the years of the righteous. They die on the same day they were born. Early Jewish Christians applied the same idea to Jesus, though they measured conception different than the Jews measured birthday. But the pattern and the idea of a complete symmetrical lifespan is the same. So the question they asked wasn't, when was Jesus born? The question was, on what day did He die? Because that would tell them when He was conceived. And many early Christian writers placed the crucifixion on March 25th based on specific Passover calculations. And if the Messiah died on March 25th, then the early Jewish Christians believed He was conceived on March 25th. And if He was conceived on March 25th, you can see where this is going. March 25th plus 9 months equals December 25th. This is the earliest Christian logic for the date. Not paganism, not copying, not synchronism. A Jewish theological pattern applied to the Messiah. In fact, Augustine wrote about this in his work On the Trinity. In Book 4, Chapter 5, he said, He is believed to have been conceived on the 25th of March, upon which day He also suffered. So the womb of the Virgin in which He was conceived, where no mortal was begotten, corresponds to the new tomb in which He was buried, wherein was never man laid. That alone explains the origins for December 25th. But there's more to it than that. More than I can get into in this video. That'll actually be next time. The question I want to ask now, though, is why December 25th became the official celebration anyway? So why did the church officially lock in December 25th? It wasn't because they were trying to copy a pagan party. It was because, based on that integral age math we just did, they truly believed that that was the day He was born. To early church fathers like Hippolytus, the math was perfect. March 25th conception equals December 25th birth. Now, as we learn more about history, we now know that's not true. We'll get into that actual date soon. But the date of December 25th, it stuck. Not because it was pagan, but because for centuries, the church genuinely believed that was the day. And even as the understanding of the timeline shifted, the date remained. Not just as a birthday calculation, but as something deeper. And over time, as the church grew among Gentiles, the focus shifted from conception to birth. Not because someone rewrote history, but because the celebration expanded. People began celebrating the birth, the revelation to the nations, the incarnation, the entire story of God becoming flesh. December 25th became a symbolic day of celebration, a theological anniversary, not in a literal birthday calculation. But there's something else happening at the same time. Not every Christian tradition celebrates December 25th. Some celebrate on a completely different day, January 6th, and that became a major part of the story. In the eastern part of the church, especially in places like Egypt, Syria, and Asia Minor, the celebration of Jesus' birth and baptism happened on January 6th. This day became known as Epiphany. January 6th wasn't competing with December 25th. It wasn't trying to correct the date, so don't misunderstand that. It simply marked a different emphasis: the revelation of Jesus, the arrival of the Magi, the baptism, the manifestation of his glory to the nations. It was a different angle on the same story. So in the earliest centuries, you didn't have December 25th versus January 6th. Which one is right? You had two traditions, one celebrating the incarnation on December 25th, and one celebrating the revelation of Christ on January 6th. Two lenses, same Messiah, same story. And over time, the Western Church emphasized December 25th for the birth, while the Eastern Church continued celebrating Epiphany. But when you put the two traditions together, you get a picture that actually matches the timeline we've been tracing. Conception on December 25th, revelation on January 6th. The early church didn't try to hide this. They didn't debate it. They didn't fight about it. They simply celebrated the Messiah's arrival in multiple ways. And this is where everything begins to come together. Once you understand the ancient Jewish worldview, once you understand the early Christian calculation dates, once you read the early sources for yourself, the pagan origin falls apart completely. It survives today for one reason: people repeat it without researching it. But the actual evidence, Jewish, Roman, and Christian, points in one direction. December 25th began in Jerusalem, not Rome. Early Jewish believers weren't trying to copy anything. They were honoring the moment the Messiah entered the world. And that's why the date has stayed with us for nearly 2,000 years. One last thought before we finish up. In our modern world, we celebrate birthdays. But in the ancient world, especially among Jews, the defining moment in life wasn't birth. It was conception. That's when the story truly begins. That's when life is formed. That's when God enters the timeline in a miraculous way. So when early believers looked at December 25th, they weren't just looking for a birthday party. They were revealing the moment that the Word became flesh. And honestly, that's something worth celebrating. Whether we celebrate December 25th or not, the point is not the date. It's a person. If this has helped you see the real story behind December 25th, make sure you subscribe, tap the notification bell, and don't miss the next episode, because we're going to look at when exactly was Jesus born. If it wasn't December 25th, when was it? Well, we have a pretty good idea. In that video, we're going to walk through the breakdown of the priestly divisions, ancient Jewish calendars, climatic and agricultural evidences, early Christian writings, the prophetic symbolism of tabernacles, and how a fall birth fits the entire biblical storyline. If you want a perfect video to watch while you're waiting for that one, check out the video on the screen. Thank you for joining me. Stay blessed, and I will see you next time.